There are 30,000 children that are in the foster care system today in the state of Texas. There are 500,000 children that are in the U.S. that's in the foster care system. And I said, who would stand with me today for these kids? That day, Nedra Wade, she stood and raised her hand and she said, Pastor, I will. And then another person stood and said, I will. And another stood and said, I will. And another stood and said, I will. Well, after the process started in our church and family after family, within 3 months, 39 children were placed in families in our church.
Jesus, Jesus.
What if there was more families waiting for children than children waiting for families? So we called Child Protective Services. And they said, if that happens in any county, that will be the first ever.
Jesus, oh, for grace to trust Him more.
Hi, my name is Aline and this is David. We have been going to Antioch for about 5 years and we decided to share our story today because it's Stand Sunday. We decided to grow our family about 10 years ago. We were unsuccessful with miscarriages and failed IVF attempts. Towards the end of our IVF cycle, we felt a calling to adopt through the Department of Children and Family. Most families in our church are fostering and then decide to adopt, whereas our goal was to adopt from the beginning. We took MAPS training class in 2016. And we were licensed. We took a pause from the adoption process because we had another miscarriage and we needed some time to grieve. We then decided again to pursue adoption and we waited about 1.5 years for a call.
Yeah, so we got the call in January of this year about Nathan, a 15-month-old boy at the time. We were given about a week to decide yes or no whether or not we wanted to move forward. So we said yes. So we spent the next 2 weeks visiting him before we brought him home at the end of February. The first few weeks were pretty rough, especially on him. He's missing his previous family a lot, and getting used to his new environment was a tough adjustment for him. And plus we were trying to figure things out as new parents, first-time parents. And also ran in parallel with the start of COVID shutdowns. So not a lot of things to do at the time either. But over the next few months, we developed a strong bond. He got more and more comfortable with us. His silliness started to show a lot more and more. His favorite thing to do now is vacuum. He has a few toy vacuums, dust busters, but he loves to play with the real thing. So we'll spend hours doing that. And also loves taking out the trash even when it's not trash day. There's a picture of him doing that.
We decided to call him Nathan because that would be his adoption name. We're hoping to adopt him by the end of the year. We settled on Nathan, which means he gave, God's gift. And that is what little Nathan is for us. He's a gift from God to our family. We have a lot to be thankful for this year. We are grateful for a loving family that's around us that helped to support and take care of Nathan when we worked from home for the first few months. We are grateful for God as well to help us find the right daycare for him. And most of all, we are thankful to have Mosaic wrap around to support us when we need it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Antioch family, what a sacred space to be in together right now as we observe Stand Sunday, really with the Big C Church around the world. And Aline and David, thank you for inviting us into these precious and sacred aspects of your journey. And just want to say, even as you were sharing, I was thinking about how both for the church, our church community as a whole, as we engage the foster care system, and as well as my own journey, I have this sense of this tension of, oh my goodness, we're in over our heads, and this doesn't always go like I think it's going to go, and it's costing more than I think it's going to cost, and then on the other side, just feeling almost more so than I ever have in my pastoring journey, that we are where the Lord wants us to be. And this isn't about us. This is about Jesus. And it's about following him where he's leading us. It's about joining him where he's calling us to be with him. And, as we worship him, as we follow him, we're gonna be serving. We're gonna be loving others. And what he's doing in us, there is a weight, an eternal weight to what he is doing in us. But I really believe in this season, it's not just about us. It's about our eyes being fixed upon him, and it's about us as a people together pouring out who we are, and loving, and receiving back from the people that he has called us to love. Amen. So, hey, we are in Ephesians, starting chapter 6, and the focus of these next few verses are on kids and their parents. So the elementary kids have gone to their discipleship groups, and I'm hoping that there are a few high school and middle school students still sticking around. And just to make your eyes roll, all you college students who are living at home because of COVID, maybe I can get your attention for a couple minutes. So Paul, in tandem with God, starts out with an instruction, with a command, and I think this is one of the heaviest hitting commands we've got in Scripture. He doesn't start out with it's kind of easing into the water. There's no like beginners wax on, wax off kind of deal. And I at first I threw that little thing in there for the younger people, and then I realized I'm 40. I don't think anybody's going to know what I'm talking about. So if you don't know what that reference was to, ask your parents. But so here's the instructions. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with the promise, so that it may go well with you and that you enjoy a long life on the earth. All right. Maybe some of you think, obey my parents. Sweet, no problem. Check, got that covered. But if your household is like mine, it might be more like, in the 15 minutes leading up to when we logged on Zoom this morning, there's a 50-50 chance that there's some kind of a blow up, an incident, you might say. And real world, I had to stop my recording not too long ago because of a blow up that I couldn't quite push through. And I went downstairs, and at the end of things, I actually had to apologize a little bit because of the way I responded. So man, this is real life. So 3 things I want to throw out to you. One is, this isn't just hard, this is impossible. This pushes us into Jesus, saying you've got to do some transformative work, and I need you. I need your grace. I need your love. I need you to speak identity into me so that I can love those around me, and my heart is open to listen and receive from, to submit to my parents. We need them. And you know what? 2, your parents have an equally, and this is going to be hard to believe sometimes, your parents have an equally difficult task. They're learning. They are being stretched to the max. They're being disciplined even by God, and they're challenged. They're growing, and they need grace. We need grace. I'm going to speak as a dad. We need grace from you too. And last, and by far not least, man, forgiveness, asking forgiveness, and being willing to forgive, that's what wins the hour. rhythms of forgiveness, asking forgiveness and receiving forgiveness, giving forgiveness. Oh man, it has to be one of the foundations of our family culture. And is it humbling to ask forgiveness? Is it humbling to give forgiveness? It is, and it's not easy. And we need the Lord in those spaces too. But hey, man, so thankful for y'all. All right, you go on with what you were doing. You've probably been on hours and hours of Zoom calls for class, and you're ready to peace out and do something else. And all you adults, you may be in the same spot. You may be like, I do not want to stand and look at a screen anymore. I just need a break. Totally understand. But for those of you who want to stick around, we're going to keep going. All right, I'm gonna read Ephesians 6:1-4. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So I want to start by talking about this word right. It's the root that we get righteousness or righteous from, and that's a pretty heavy-hitting word, right? It's rich context, the Old and New Testament. So I want to talk about 4 quick pieces. Righteousness emanates from God's nature. It's not an arbitrary list of traits, but what is right and true and good is defined by God's nature. Throughout the Old Testament and into the New, the righteousness of God is interwoven with the justice of God, and so righteousness is, in one way to throw it out there, is righteousness is the being. What is it to be righteous? Inherently righteous, good, true. And then justice is, what does it look to live that righteousness out? So a lot of times there's a punitive nature attributed to justice. Different word, different context. We're talking about the restorative, the positive aspects of when justice is lived out. Third, there's this courtroom connotation. We get the word justification from this root word of right or righteous. And so it's like somebody standing before a judge and being declared right, righteous, innocent, justified. And there's a sobering aspect of that, recognizing that we are not righteous in and of ourselves, and we need the righteousness of God. And that's where this 4th piece comes in. And there's a strong covenantal aspect of righteousness, that it's being partakers of the covenant that God Himself bears the weight of. It is in that relational community, that context, where righteousness is imputed, righteousness is given. You know, Abram, who God was establishing covenant, he believed God, and God credited it to him as righteousness. And you know, seeing that covenant relationship through the lens of Jesus, we have kingdom, we have family, we have a body, an interconnected, living, breathing body with Christ as its head. Strong relational connotations here. So with those 4 pieces in mind, I want to go back and read a few verses out of the psalm that Anna and Sophie read from last week during our worship time. And it pulls together so many aspects of God's nature, as well as His relationship with us in covenant relationship. Psalm 103 describes this God who redeems your life from the pit and crowns you with love and compassion, who satisfies your desires with good things, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. The Lord works righteousness and justice for the oppressed. I'm going to skip down. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is His love for those who fear Him. As far as the east is from the west, so far He has removed our transgressions from us. As the Father has compassion on His children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear Him. God's nature, His justice, His imputed righteousness, making us justify this relationship with this Father, this compassionate Father who knows our frame. It's beautiful. One other piece from one other word from the psalm here, or the concept, is the fear of God. This is mentioned 2 times, and I feel like this fear of God concept, which we see a lot in Scripture, is a tenuous term, because since when did fear motivate someone to press into a compassionate and loving God? So I want to talk about that just for a second. You know, sin, in one translation of sin is transgression, which was here in verse 12. Sin is opposite of the nature of God, the righteousness of God, and it's opposite of how God would have us act. So there is it's not just we are guilty before Him, but there is a barrier in our relationship with Him and each other. And this barrier is so intense. I'm going to read from Romans 5. The barrier is so intense that we're actually called His enemies in that place. But God demonstrates His own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Since we have now been justified by His blood, how much more shall we be saved from God's wrath through Him? For if, while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to Him through the death of His Son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through His life? Not only this so, but we also boast in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we now have reconciliation. So this concept of the fear of God, that we as a finite people stand before an infinite God. We, a broken people, stand before one who is whole, in whom there is no shadow or change. We, a people whose sinful thoughts, words, and actions make us inherently enemies of this God and each other. Yet what Jesus has accomplished through His death and resurrection utterly transforms the nature of our relationship with God and also with each other. As we become sons and daughters, we've been given a spirit of adoption by which we cry, Abba, Father. So why am I laboring on this concept of righteousness within the context of children obeying their parents, and parents nurturing and loving their kids? It's because if we as parents experience intimate revelations of God's glorious grace, His compassion, His holiness, His righteousness within the covenant relationship with Him, in this space where we're wrestling with our brokenness, we're grieving over our brokenness and our pain. There's a reverence and an adoration of our King that produces a humble compassion in us towards our children. If that is our starting point as we approach parenting, and as we approach this command of our children being commanded to obey and honor us, then we cultivate an environment for the Spirit of God to do what He does best, and that's restore hearts, ours and our children, restore relationships, enabling us and our children to learn to give and receive love, to forgive and receive forgiveness. You know, in this sacred stewardship the Lord has given us of our children, we could say it in reverse, that if we as parents just assume and require this righteous obedience from our children as something that we are owed, that's something that God demands, and it's devoid of an experiential and relational wrestling in our own journey with the Lord that we can bring to our children, if that does not exist, then we inevitably lay an impossible burden on our children. And we distort the image of the triune God who has given this sacred stewardship of their lives as parents. So this is a weighty thing. So to go back to the positive side, bringing humility, bringing compassion, bringing the places of authenticity where we are digging in with the Lord and wrestling with the Lord as He unearths deep places in us and brings healing and restoration in us. If we can bring that in our entry point with our children is compassion, then we're at a good starting point. All right. Another aspect of this command of children, obey your parents. This place of obedience. This word has a connotation of, or the etymology is under to hear. So there's this aspect of as a child, putting yourself under the authority of the one giving the instruction and giving them honor and obeying them. And I feel like we constantly need a kingdom view to overtake the surrounding view of our culture on authority. So I want to talk about that just a little bit. At its core, authority is an increased responsibility to care for the well-being of another. It's more work. It's a call to serve, to listen, to steward. Listen to how this is actually stated in two different of the epistles, in Mark and in Matthew. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Authority is not a position of entitlement. It's not a position from which to control others. Listen to this passage in Luke 22. A dispute also arose among them as to which of them was considered to be the greatest. And Jesus said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. Totally countercultural, and redefines what authority is. I thought that the example that I thought of this, and it was a really sweet memory that came to mind as I was thinking about authority. Growing up, whenever we would eat chicken in our family, my parents would let us pick we'd always get our favorite pieces of the chicken. And, in the back of my mind, as I was thinking about it, I was like, yeah, I thought my dad's favorite pieces of the chicken were the back and the wing. and honestly, I think wings, I think he does like wings, right, Dad? But in the reality, they gave us the first pick. And then they ate what was left over because they loved us. So, small little example. But even little preferences, like letting your kids take the pick of the chicken, that's what authority looks like. Now, that said, I think especially in the context of parenting, I want to say this, that self-care, that if you don't care for yourself physically and emotionally, spiritually, mentally, you're not going to make it as a parent. You're not going to have anything to give. And one of the biggest learning curves, I'll say this for my and our journey, Sarah and I's journey, and I think this is true for a lot of couples, that one of the steepest learning curves in the journey of parenting, especially in the early years, is learning how to be refreshed and restored in the rhythms of life when our margins have just disappeared. And we have this marriage relationship that we are called to pour into. We have our children that we're called to pour into. And so we hit these points of realizing, if I don't put on the oxygen mask on the plane first, I'm going to die. And a lot of times it takes hitting some walls for us to begin changing some of the rhythms and say, actually, it's not, I'm not being selfish by caring for myself and connecting with the Lord in restoring ways. So I just want to, you probably know this, but I just want to again give you permission and even an exhortation, care for yourself. even in these places of as authorities in your children's lives, laying yourselves down for them. One thing I meant to say earlier on the front end of the sermon is if you don't have kids or if you don't have children living at home, either one, my hope is that you can still take aspects of relationship with the Lord and relationship with each other and apply them in your lives. It might take a little bit of effort here, but I don't think too much to pull these truths into your own context. So I want to encourage you to stick with me here. I want to talk a little bit more about authority. You know, one thing about authority is it almost always requires that decisions be made that affect the welfare of those under the person in authority's care. And one question of authority that I think is really important to think about as parents is whose responsibility is it to initiate something? It could be a process. It could be seeing a need. It could be something you feel like the Lord's calling you. But to initiate and then include the appropriate voices and votes. Well, voices and votes is some vocabulary we actually use at Antioch Waltham in our staff. And voices means who needs to give input into the decision, into the journey. And then votes doesn't necessarily mean that we do everything by democracy. It means who is at the table making the decision together, and who is giving input, how it's given, who is involved in the decision-making processes. In our family context, those are going to look different in different seasons of life. Is everything a family discussion? No, it's not. And as a mother and a father, being on the same page with how we make decisions, and even letting our kids know this is how we make decision as husband and wife, and there's what context do we want to get input from you, and when is it not a discussion, because it is appropriate for it not to be a discussion sometimes with our children. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. Another question is, when opinions differ, who has the authority to make the choice or decision, and how is the choice made? And specifically, how is the choice made? And within the context of marriage, this might be just intuitive to you, so I'm preaching to the choir, but I just want to say that in marriage, I feel like consensus, if it's any decision of weight, is always best. And many times it takes a lot of labor to get to a place of consensus, but it's worth it. Lastly, there's a huge issue of trust as in any relational aspect of authority, but especially in family, and ultimately for the person who is under authority, whether they're putting themselves under authority or not. One of the biggest questions is the person in authority over me making decisions based on my or our well-being, those who they're caring for, or are they making decisions based upon their own their own needs, their own desires or preferences? And this is where Jesus in his demonstration of what humility is, and putting the preferences of oneself below another's. Philippians 2 is just so beautiful. Tim last week talked about in the context of marriage and Jesus' example with the church of how a husband loves and serves and prefers his wife. And this is very much related to a parenting journey with our kids. Okay, I've only got a couple minutes here, so here's the deal. I'm gonna record another sermon for those of you, especially you parents who are saying, I need some practical, I need some handholds here. On the parenting side, I'm going to record another sermon. So this would be kind of the foundation, and we're going to start getting into the practicals. But just to get to a tidbit of practical, I want to skip down to verse 4 and say and just touch on one piece. Fathers, don't exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. This word exasperate, it's provoke. Really to push somebody's buttons. The Greek etymology is from close beside and to become angry. Those two words put together. And I tell you what, in our house, I see this play out a lot between brothers and sisters. getting up in somebody's business, getting close and up in somebody's business and provoking to a place of anger intentionally. Happens all the time. So, in saying that, giving you a picture connected to that word, you may be as a parent like, I hope I grew out of that about 25 years ago, except for when my wife plans another family outing when the Pats game, or as the wife may say, next time my husband skips out on the dishes or something, that he's going to be provoked. But here's my thought on the parenting side, or one of my thoughts on the parenting side of, all the behavioral challenges that a parent walks through on a daily basis. It's a big deal. And the whining alone. If you're a parent and have experienced it recently, you'll know. You know what I'm talking about. The whining alone is enough to make a parent bring out the white flag. Sibling competition, stonewalling, bedtimes, teeth brushing. Woo! So, if even in our best place, if all of our efforts to nurture and train and discipline in loving ways, if they don't translate into the kind of behavioral patterns that I hope or expect to see, even in a relatively healthy place, it can be overwhelming. But then when you have, as a parent, these mixed motives of feeling like I have the right to be obeyed, or I feel the need to control my kids' behavior. They're not getting it, so I need to step in and lay down the law and whip things into shape here. If my frustration over a lack of control or the offense of my rights being infringed upon in the place of feeling overwhelmed by all these behavioral issues, they can easily devolve into reactions of attempting to provoke a response, a desperation, weariness, frustration and anger, shame, feeling like I'm failing as a parent. Those can all create this provoking response where I'm trying to get some kind of grip on all that's going on around me. That's not what the Lord has for us as parents. That's not what the Lord is calling us to. Instead, He is calling us to bring them up, and here the word is to nourish and nurture. It's the same word that in chapter 5 when God is describing what it looks like for Jesus caring for the church, nourishing, nurturing. And I'm gonna take up there for in the next part of the sermon for the parents in the room. So let's stop here, and I just want to say the starting point, I believe, for parenting is, and this is gonna sound like a Sunday school answer, but it's not. The starting point for parenting is knowing Jesus and getting to the point where I learn to be real and safe with Jesus. Because if I can't, in all my mess and all my insecurities and my broken places, all my blind spots, if I don't feel safe to be real with Jesus, then how can I, as a parent, create an atmosphere where my children are going to be safe to be real, to be present and open up to receive the nourishing care, the instruction, the modeling that I have as a parent, and so that's the admonition, is saying, Lord, will you continue teaching me, and I want this to be real, not just kind of floating out there, but what is it? Where are the places where it is hard for you to be real? What are the places that about your own journey that you can't even go to with the Lord? Places that He wants to unpack from family of origin, or places fears of insufficiency or inadequacy, anxiety, places that bring weight and depression. The Lord wants to go to these places, not to shame you, but to just be with you, And from that place of being with you as a father, he has some things for you. A lot of it's just going to be loving the stuffing out of you. There's going to be some instruction. There's even some discipline, Hebrews tells us, loving discipline that bears the peaceful fruit of righteousness. And so in your regular space with the Lord, in your dialoguing with your spouse and the people you trust around you, beginning to flesh out more, what does it look like for me to unpack my personal journey with the Lord and with those around me in ways that create space for me to enter in with compassion, with understanding, with grace for my children as I nourish them, as I care for them in the Lord, and as He in turn molds and shapes their heart, which then flows into the behavior and the obedience. All right, we're going to stop there. Love y'all. Hope to see you this afternoon at the park as we worship together. Have a great rest of your day.